In this video I want to share my first impressions on the brand new Fuji GFX 100S, which is this beauty here in my hands, and essentially is a Fuji GFX 100 but in a much more compact body. And in order to make that video more interesting, I will shoot a very special lens on the GFX 100S, namely the Fuji GF 80mm, and that has a widest open aperture of f1.7 and a full frame equivalent focal length of 80mm in the Fuji GFX system is actually 63mm, applying a crop factor of 0.79. Normally when I have some new gear to discuss on my channel, I also want to put it in perspective to its closest relatives, of course. And this is a video which will come in the next days, where I will compare the GFX 100S with the GFX 50R and the GFX 100, compare these cameras, also provide footage and sample images and share my thoughts, and then people can make their own decisions, of course, what they like more and what their own personal preference would be. In this video, I really want to focus on sample images and footage from this lens camera combination, because I found it absolutely stunning what I could get out of this camera with that lens mounted on top of it. And I will spend most of the time in the video on the sample images and not, like always, go into details and specs of this lens here. But I want to nevertheless provide a few data points which I think are important to mention. And the first is, if you look at that lens, it looks quite tall, but if you remove the lens hood, it's actually becoming much less intrusive. And it is actually a combination which you can use for street. It's very good in hand with that hand grip, and you can very nicely shoot with it and capture all kinds of scenes. And a focal length of 80mm, as I said before, full frame equivalent 63mm, also is a very interesting value proposition for street, because it's beyond the normal focal length of 50mm, but not so far out in the tele that you might not want to use it for street. And here with this 80mm, you will get some compression effect coming from the tele properties of that lens, but not too much. And I will actually show later a couple of images which confirm that this combination could easily be used for street photography too. The next data point on the lens is its weight. The weight is close to 800 grams, 795 to be precise, so it's not overly heavy for a medium format lens. The minimum shooting distance is 70 centimeters and the maximum reproduction ratio is 0.15, so you can actually get fairly close to your subject. You get quite some magnification, and if you use the enormous reserves in resolution on that 100 megapixel sensor and cropping in post, you can generate macro type or close-up type situations with that lens camera combination here. The last remark I want to make before we go into the sample footage is that this is a weather resistant lens. It's also written clearly at the flip side of the lens here, weather resistant, which means this will withstand the elements and you can use it under rough environmental conditions. And now let's have a look into the sample images. Let me discuss them, let me share my thoughts, and then also I'm curious, of course, to receive your comments and discuss these images. I think this is absolutely unique what you get here. I don't think I've seen a combination of an 80mm medium format lens with such a wide open aperture on a medium format camera before, and I think is something where I a million times enjoyed shooting with almost the whole day yesterday. I want to start by setting the scene with a few images. So a series of images I took on that day with the GFX 100S and the GF 80mm was taken in a student home downtown Zurich, right in the old part of the town. And here's the entrance, and the reason why I wanted to show this image is to provide a first impression what sharpness you get with that lens camera combo here. Looking at that door lock here, this is absolutely brilliant in terms of sharpness and clarity. And since I was shooting exclusively with an aperture of f1.7, you also lose depth of field very quickly if you move away from the subject in the scene where your focus is sitting. That student home where I took my very first photos with my brand new GFX 100S was a total mess on that day. And the reason is they had a long ongoing party in the night before, and you see here in the image some leftover pizza, you see some cigarettes here, you see all kinds of items, an ashtray. But why I wanted to show this image is sometimes there is beauty in the chaos, and It's just a real life situation. That's exactly what happened overnight, and this is the aftermath of what the party left over. And looking at the bottle here, you see again the clarity and sharpness of that lens camera combo, and you also see the dreamy look in the background when everything becomes blurry because I was shooting at f1.7. So I decided in that student home to take photos at the window with a clear backlight situation, and that is something which typically for portraits can be quite nice because you see here indicated the window, and you see my model smoking out of the window, and you see how dreamy this image is, and it's almost not from this world, and I like that a lot, and it's clearly due to the fantastic optical properties of that 80mm lens shut widest open at f1.7. Backlight situations can actually generate a nice dreamy appearance of a portrait, and here you see the model coming from the other side, looking directly into the camera and having that backlight in the window in the background. And what I wanted to show here is again the incredible level of clarity and sharpness you get in these images here on the eyelashes. And I think with this camera lens combination you can do absolutely fantastic things. And clearly sometimes I like it if I see indicated on the background what's going on. Here you just see this is directly in the backlight, and that's why everything in the background is getting white, washed out, totally blurry, and puts the emphasis and the focus on the face of the model and the beauty of the model and away from any distracting elements in the background. I should say I don't mind a mess in a student home, and I started to enjoy leveraging that window backlight situation here now with two models, and again cropping in by 100%. You see the level of clarity and sharpness we have here. Also on the hands, absolutely fantastic, but as soon as you leave your focus plane, actually everything becomes dreamy, blurry, and you get this shallow depth of field coming from an aperture of f1.7. But in general, what you see here, quite nice, and I think again is a good example that taking portraits in a backlight situation can create some unique look, which you don't get if you have the structure blurry but still existent in the background of a portrait situation. This image here I wanted to show because it illustrates nicely the shallow depth of field in a two model portrait situation. So shot again at f1.7, as every image I'm going to show in this video here. The model in the background is super sharp and super crisp, and the focus really was sitting where it was supposed to sit, and this was all done by autofocus. I have not used any manual focus in everything I'm going to show in this video, but the model in the foreground is already fuzzy or blurry because of the shallow depth of field coming from that wide open aperture, and of course a focal length of 80mm on large format on Fuji, which refers to 63mm on a full frame equivalent. Here another dreamy image, my model looking at the flowers in her hands, and again have a look how clear and crisp this image is and how dreamy the background here with that open window, where you see now a little more indicated here, still at f1.7. The light changed a little bit in the course of the day, so it was not as harsh as backlight as it used to be on the other images. Trying to split the image here in two halves. On the right hand side you have a yellow painted wall in that student home, and on the left hand side you have the open window with harsh backlight. And the shallow depths of field can be easily seen if you zoom into the eyes. So the left hand eye, which is looking into the camera, is totally crisp and sharp with all the details. The right hand eye is already blurry and dreamy, and in this way creates a three-dimensional pop in the image. I don't think I've ever generated with a lens camera combo before, and it's very hard to carry this over on YouTube, but the combination of an even larger sensor than full frame with an 80mm large format lens is creating unique looks which you can't generate in any other way. Same story here, there are all kinds of colors in that student home. This time I split up by roughly 1/3. On the left hand side I had a blue painted wall, on the right hand side the usual white painted wall, and then my model standing in front of some balloon here, which I think is a leftover from the party. Super crisp, super sharp, and a very interesting three-dimensional situation we have here in that image. This image here I wanted to show to demonstrate that as soon as you're outside, I left the student home by now, independence on the distances between the camera and the subject and the background, you actually get some impression about what's going on in the background. And in many cases I prefer these kind of situations. Clearly the backlight situation of my models in front of the window they provide a very special dreamy look. But having some structure in the background, so here for instance in front of a shopping window, provides a bit more information about what's actually going on in the scene. And the guy I was shooting here, again, super crisp, super sharp, Corona compliant by the way, and I think is again a good image and again shows the three-dimensionality of this lens camera combo. In this particular image, I further increased the distance between the camera and the subject and the background, and you get now here some glimpse into the shopping windows, but also further down into one of these crooked alleys in Zurich, where we later will move on to a fountain and will also take some images of flowers. This image here I wanted to show in order to demonstrate the clarity. So what you see here in that image is so crystal clear, it's like you would stand in front of these flowers yourself and see the scene with your naked eyes. And clearly you have this dreamy background again coming from an f1.7. You see there are shopping windows far back in the background. There is a tree here with branches, but the foreground so crisp, so clear, as if you would stand there in real life. Here is an image focusing on flowers decorating that fountain downtown Zurich. Again, the sharpness of the lens is beyond any doubt. Looking at that, it's just perfect. It's so clear, so crystal clear, as if you would stand in front of that flower and see it with your naked eyes. Based on the shallow depth of field, you also get that three-dimensional pop in the image. I think I like it a lot. Flowers are typically not per se super exciting, but if you get them in a composition like here, I think it can make a very nice image. Many people think that tele lenses are mainly used for portraits and in studio. I've shown several times on my channel that they can excellently be leveraged for landscape photography, but also for street. And here's the situation about that little girl trying to get familiar with that fountain and the flowers in that fountain and being super interested in what's going on in the scene. And if I go to the next one, she finally decided to pick one of those flowers. So we're really telling a story here about a moment in time which never comes back. And if we zoom in here, again, the level of clarity and where the focus was sitting is just incredibly good. Using a telelens like this Fuji GF 80mm on street provides a very nice three-dimensional appearance of the images. And you see here the scene. On the left-hand side, you see some security guys. In the foreground, where the focus was sitting on my subject, you see my model here, very sharp and very clear. And then you see people just walking by on the right-hand side. And back in the background here, you see a very dreamy, very blurry appearance of Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich, which is one of the main streets downtown Zurich. I will stop here, and this is the last image I'm showing. I think then I have shown enough images to provide some data points how the GFX 100S with that 80mm lens is actually performing and what type of situations it can be used for. So here is an already cropped in image from some flowers, and if we look at these flowers, it's a macro type situation. And since you have these huge resolution reserves on the camera with 100 megapixels, or if you have a still scene, even 400 megapixels via the multi-shot option, you can actually deeply crop into the image. And this image still has 8385 times 6289 pixels. And if you zoom further in, it's a macro type image which you can use here. So all in, I will stop here. I hope this review was helpful for you if you are looking to enter the GFX system, or if you have maybe the GFX system and are more interested now in the compact version of the famous GFX 100 in its S form, or if you already own one of those cameras and are interested in a more teletype lens which provides a very dreamy three-dimensional look. If you like that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching and peace out.